The following recording has been created by Youth Out Loud and supported by Healthwatch Kingston. It has been funded by the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames Resilience Fund.
Hello, I'm Scott Bacon from Youth Out Loud and Healthwatch Kingston. Today we've got a member from Youth Out Loud and a parent joining us to talk about access to NHS and social care services for people living with a disability. So I'm joined by Isabella from Youth Out Loud and Hen. Hen, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story?
Sure. Hi. So my son, who's now a teenager, was born with club feet, and that is a process by which he had to have his feet corrected. But sometimes 1 in 10, the procedure doesn't go to plan, and you therefore need ongoing kind of treatment involving stretching of Achilles tendons, transferring of tendons so that you can put the feet in the right position. Basically, ongoing operations, probably every 3 years until he's fully grown. So really, I'm here today to talk about how it is for young people when they have kind of an intermittent disability. So after my son has his procedures done, he's then in full leg casts, and obviously he's then wheelchair bound. So I'm here today to talk about our experiences when he's in his wheelchair versus when he's not in his wheelchair.
Cool. Thank you, Hen. Isabella, do you have any questions for Hen to start us off?
Yes, so thank you for joining us. As a first kind of question, when you go to visit healthcare facilities with your son, are they physically accessible? And could things be improved in any way? And do things vary between services used specifically for his condition and services used more generally? For example, going to the GP or the dentist. And does it change when he is in and out of his wheelchair?
Well, yes and no. The honest answer. So you find kind of the services that we use specifically for his condition. They are good in the sense that they're wheelchair accessible, but there's always some issues with, like the automatic door. When you press the button, sometimes it doesn't work. So then you're having to hold the door and sort of shove him through the door at the same time. But I mean, these are kind of teething issues. They don't last forever. When you go to the GP, again, there's always ramps and things, so that's always quite good. Turning circles for an intermittent wheelchair user tend to be bigger than those that are probably in one a lot more often and therefore better at it. But is there enough room for him to manoeuvre? Yes. Being a teenager now, he does want to be able to manoeuvre himself rather than have his mum sort of push him around. The only thing that I have found is possibly at the dentist. The dentist is great, don't get me wrong, but are they designed for a wheelchair? Specifically, the one that we use isn't, and it is quite a modern dentist. Yes, there's no ramps or what have you to get in, but the actual rooms themselves are quite small. So transferring from the wheelchair into the dentist chair can be a little bit problematic, but we have managed to do it.
Would he be able to stay in his chair? Has he ever given that as an option if he's been...
No, because you have to lay flat, don't you, with your head back so that they can sort of see what you're doing. And with the specific chairs that we use with my son, they're really basic chairs. I'll be honest with you. We have to order them from the Red Cross. We then have to go quite a long way to go and pick them up. And they are really basic chairs. We're grateful because you're not given a wheelchair anymore from a hospital. If you need one, you have to hire them from the Red Cross. So we're grateful for the service, but it does mean that they're really basic and they don't recline. So for dentists, for example, you'd have to transfer into the chair.
So when he's had an operation and he needs a chair, you get obviously the chair from a different place. And so it's not close to the hospital or not that far.
No, you have to go on to, and again, we're quite practiced in this technique now. Since Henry has been having to use wheelchairs, so he's 14 soon. The hospitals haven't been providing wheelchairs, so you have to go through the Red Cross to hire them. Now, the Red Cross are wonderful. You speak to them on the phone, like a central hub. They'll ask for your postcode and then they'll refer you to the nearest pickup point. So we've hired them. I'll tell you the last two times. Once we had to pick up from a kind of a car park, a Sainsbury's car park in Cobham. And then on another occasion, I had to go to Wimbledon to pick up the wheelchair, both of which are, I don't know, 6, 7 miles away from where I live.
Yeah. Did he offer to take it to the hospital, like to meet you while he's there, or because thinking obviously you drive, I know you drive. If somebody didn't and they had the same situation,
Yeah, that would be an issue. They don't offer to deliver them to, they actually, no, that's not fair. I think if you live, so say for example, the Wimbledon one, if you live near Wimbledon, they would deliver it to your house. But I don't think they deliver it further than, say, within the local sort of 1 or 2 miles.
okay.
I think another thing that might be interesting to talk about is that you mention that he doesn't like being pushed around by you. Do the wheelchairs that he's provided with allow him to push himself around, or are they the basic level of you can only be pushed around by someone else?
It's
So
a,
does he still get that level of independent mobility?
you have a choice, but obviously it's down to availability. So you can have a self-propelling wheelchair, okay, which is the one that's got like the sort of handrails, the big handrails round the wheels, which he much prefers. But that's based on availability. So if you can't get one of those, then you just have to get one that I would have to, or someone else would have to push him in. But you're quite right, Isabella. He's much happier when he can push himself about.
I mean, that makes complete sense, especially if you're a teenager. You want
Yeah.
to be independent. You don't want to have someone else travel you around everywhere. That makes full sense.
Yeah.
So the next area of discussion that I have is talking about understanding his condition. So are you both clearly updated about his condition, how surgeries have gone over time? And do they give you more or less information as a parent? And when your son was young, did they tell him about his condition in a way that made sense to him as a young child?
Well, when he was very young, we were under Kingston Hospital for the kind of correction of his feet. It's called the Ponseti technique, and it involves casts, full leg casts that are changed on a weekly basis. Now, he was a baby, minimum of a week old when he first went into those casts. So obviously, the conversations about his condition and his treatment were obviously with me. As he's got bigger and understands a whole lot more, then I would say that his understanding of his condition is probably better than mine. The people that we deal with now aren't Kingston Hospital directly. We now go to St George's, and they have been brilliant. We've been with the same consultant, which I know is very rare these days, but it has been of great benefit that the lady that did the first, well, actually, maybe the second tenotomy operation, possibly when Henry was about 4 or 5, we still see her. She's still our lead consultant. After he has an operation, we have a follow-up appointment that's normally about 8 weeks, 9 weeks afterwards. And then when he's out of casts, so as in he's not having treatment and we're just kind of waiting for the next stage, then we go to see her on a yearly basis. And yeah, I think she's been fantastic, if I'm honest, keeping us in the loop, talking to Henry directly as opposed to me. Yeah, I can't fault the way that they've kept us informed about his condition and how they clearly explain it, largely to me because my son understands it way more than I do. So no, I can't fault them.
That's really, really good to hear. And I think, especially as well, talking to a young person directly, and it seems like if there were any decisions that had to be made about his care, that he would be able to, it would be him making them, which is really positive to hear. Because
Yeah.
obviously it impacts him the most, so he should be the one making it. So it's really good to hear that you're being kept up to date well. He understands everything completely, which is also great. And also that you've had the same consultant. I think the consistency means that you obviously have the same, both of you are on the same page. So that's really, really good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not pleasant when Henry has to have an operation, but the fact that he knows the lady that's going to do it and the fact that he knows he'll come out the other side, and this is all, for the greater good, if you like. I think that makes it a whole lot more reassuring for him that he's in good hands. So that's great.
So the next area of discussion is around talking to healthcare professionals about his condition if something were to come up. So if outside of appointment times you needed to speak to someone about your son's club feet, can you just speak to your consultant? Can you get an appointment with your consultant when you need to? Or would you have to see the GP instead? And if you have been in this situation, how is it handled?
We can go directly to the specialist. When I say directly to, I mean to the department, if you like. What I find is easier is I can email them. I've got an email address. That works really well. So if I have any concerns, then either our consultant or one of her team gives us a call back. So we don't have to go via the GP. But I do see lots of letters that come back from St George's, keeping the GP in the loop with Henry's treatment. They obviously have to show us the correspondence, if you like, that's going backwards and forwards. So I always get CC'd into the letters that go back to the GP. But no, I haven't specifically had to speak to the GP about this condition with Henry. I go straight to the specialist department at St George's.
That's really positive to hear. I think specialists obviously know more about that aspect than GPs who, especially for specific health conditions, they're not going to know the exact fine details. And it makes sense because that's not their specialism. So it's really good to hear that you can talk directly to the specialist and that your GP is kept in the loop. So that sounds really positive.
Yeah.
So the next section of questions is more on the social care side of things than the physical health access side. So have you ever had a care needs assessment?
I would say no. And I think this is because it's an intermittent disability situation. Okay. So club feet isn't classed as a disability. However, it would be really, really useful if when my son has had to have further treatment and therefore goes into a wheelchair, that we do have a care assessment, if I'm honest, especially as he gets older. There are times when he can't do things that his other friends are doing because of obviously accessibility needs. And I think that becomes more apparent the older you get because you don't really want to miss out. He has a lot of freedom when he's not in his wheelchair, and he can come and go as he pleases and go and have a laugh with his friends. And obviously he can't do that when he's in a wheelchair, which is quite difficult. It would be quite nice if someone did sit us down and said, well, listen, you can do this, or you could get help from these people. It would be nice to have that, even if we didn't use it. But we've never really been offered it because it's intermittent disability.
I think that's a really important point to raise because obviously if you are unable to carry out everyday tasks in with the same ease as before, that is frustrating. And I think it would be good for support to be available, even if it's only affecting him for 8 weeks every however long. Because if you are using a wheelchair, you can't necessarily access your home as easily, and you're less likely to have ramps in place already because you don't already need them. So I think you raise a really good point there. And I guess linked to that, do you feel that your son is able to get all the adjustments that he needs? So, for example, a blue badge if mobility is difficult, and how have adjustments been in places like school, for example?
Well, because again of the intermittency of his disability and the fact that club feet isn't classed as being disabled enough, I don't really like that phrase, but that's what it feels like. You don't have access to a blue badge. What would be lovely is if for that period of time where he is disabled, that he could have a blue badge would make life a lot easier. So even though he's in a wheelchair, I can't park the car in a disabled space. Now, no one's ever, like when we're accessing, getting in and out of the car, and I'm parked in a disabled space, no one's ever come up to me and sort of said anything. But when we've left the car, there's nothing to say that that is actually a car being used at the moment for a teenager who's in a wheelchair, because there's no blue badge to prove that. So I couldn't leave the car in that car parking space. So I'd then have to get my son into wherever we had to be, then go back to the car, to then move the car, to then go back to the appointment. And then obviously doing the reverse on the way back. I'd have to then go and get the car, bring it to put Henry in it, and then obviously then sort of drive away, if you like. It all seems a little bit unnecessary. And that would be one of my biggest asks, is if during the period of his disability, after operations or for whatever that means, and he's in a wheelchair with accessibility issues, that they could warrant like a temporary blue badge that has dates on it, whatever, just to make life a little bit easier, because it is hugely frustrating.
And I think that's a good point as well for just anyone who's in a wheelchair, whether it's because of having a planned operation or if it's for an injury which puts you in a plaster cast and means that you're, again, in a wheelchair. Because if you physically can't move around the places easily, it's not fair to expect that you should be walking farther from a parking space to wherever you're going. I think equally in car parks where it's multi-story, if you're in a wheelchair and there's no lift in the car park, it's just stairs. Again, you can't really expect someone to just be able to use a normal car parking space.
And you raise another good point there, and I will explain this. So when my son's at school, it's very difficult for them to accommodate a wheelchair. Now they do have lifts. But of course, lifts are fantastic. And to be fair, their lifts are working most of the time. But within, say, fire, right? You can't use the lifts. So they can't keep my son safe. The school is 3 floors high. Okay. So you can't really expect them to accommodate him just on the ground floor, because he would then be missing out on lessons that are happening with the rest of his classes on the first or the second floor. But they can't. So we had the situation last year. So he had his operation. We had 2 weeks left of school before the summer holidays, and my son couldn't go to school because they couldn't keep him safe if there was a fire. Now, again, that's not a major issue when you're in year 7. But if you're doing your GCSEs or your A levels or, exams, SATs, whatever that may be, then even missing out 1 or 2 days of school can have a detrimental effect on not only his knowledge, but also his mental health, because he's not around his friends. So we need to try and find a way to manage that better.
I think as well, even if you're in year 7, missing the last 2 weeks of school isn't ideal, because that's the last time you're going to see your friends before the summer holidays. So it's still not an ideal situation to be in. But one thing that could be interesting is, I guess, what would the school's procedure be if a student came in who needed to use a wheelchair full time? Because that's going to be more difficult to accommodate. So I guess putting in measures into place if a student did need to be evacuated in a fire, that they obviously exist, because you can get in other buildings, a wheelchair user can access them. So it'd be interesting to know what measures can be taken to keep people safe in a fire, and could they be implemented by a school in the short term?
Yeah, absolutely right. Like a short-term risk assessment and, a way through. Because I know that he would have liked to have been in school for those 2 weeks. Yes, it was only 2 weeks, and you're quite right. He would have then had access.
2 weeks is still a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So that would also be a great ask if things could be implemented, risks assessments, all of those things more in the short term. And again, With my son, we know that he was going to have that operation possibly 6 weeks, 7 weeks before. But again, Isabella, you've touched on if someone has a broken bone, broken leg, whatever that may be, then that's kind of an immediate trauma that it would be nice if they had some sort of plan in each school to allow for children, even with accessibility issues, wheelchairs, whatever that may be, that they can put something in place so they don't miss out.
Obviously your son has had to miss a lot of, well, not a lot of school, but more school than ideal as a result of his condition, and has probably had to miss out on social outings as well with his friends if the building hasn't been accessible, for example. So how has missing school and not being able to see friends been taken by your son? And if anything is missed, I guess school wise, do they give him help to catch up?
The school were brilliant in the sense that they were kind of, I mean, remembering we're now in like a post-COVID world. So they're used to doing homeschooling. So they were pretty good. Like obviously when you're in senior school or high school, whatever you guys call it now, you have your individual teachers for each subject. Some were better than others in terms of sending it through. But he did have work that he could do. And when I spoke to him about it, he didn't feel like he was falling behind. We do have a great relationship with the school that if at any point I thought that he had fallen behind, then they would have put something in place to catch him up. I have every faith with that. In terms of missing social outings, again, the timing of his operation last year was one of those weeks was alternative learning week. Now that's kind of a lot of fun for the kids, if I'm completely honest. That involves going to London Zoo, going around the London Eye, all of those kind of things uptown. So even though they weren't in the school for every day of the last week of term, my son still couldn't go on those trips because obviously it would have been too much again trying to get him onto a train. We'd have had to have travelled to Surbiton rather than the local station. All of those kind of things was a bit different and a bit difficult. So he did feel like he was missing out. And so as a mum, what do? You just promise you'll do the same trips when he's okay and he's out of his wheelchair. So yes, we did catch up on those trips, but it wasn't quite the same because he was with his mum and his sister and not with his school friends, but we did try and sort of make it work. I mean, it's difficult. It's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, I'm thankful that he understands that, and we're very thankful that it's only temporary. I mean, all of the things that I've talked about today, if you have a child that is in a wheelchair the whole time, then I would imagine that the experience that you have is mine and my son's, but tenfold in terms of what you have to deal with. So we're grateful, but there are still things that I think we can help put in place to make life just a little bit easier for both the kids and, if I'm honest, the families, because it is a huge strain.
Did you ever ask for the operation to be like at a time when actually he wouldn't miss out on certain things? If you knew like that week was coming up to do the operation afterwards?
There is some element of flexibility. They were really good. Another time when we were going to be having an operation, they'd planned it and we were going to be on holiday, or we were going to be on holiday within sort of 7 weeks after the op, which would have meant that mobility wise, my son still wouldn't have been physical enough really to get a plane and to sort of go away. So they're quite good in that respect if you've got something already booked in place. But I think we also have to be realistic and think, well, you kind of want it done as soon as you possibly can. And you kind of can't have it all. But was the hospital really good? Yeah. Could we have moved it a bit within reason? But you're just grateful that you've got something in place and you want it done as soon as possible so that you can kind of move on again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So again, I can't fault the hospital that you can have those conversations and they would accommodate you as much as possible. But obviously you weigh that up with the fact that you just want to get it done and you're going to have to sacrifice for something.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that does make complete sense, but I think it's good that there is some element of flexibility in there because it's just good. You can't some things you just don't want to miss. And I think it's good that you can take measures, I guess, to mitigate that. And I think as well, linking to your full answer to the question, that it is really good that your son's not falling behind at school. And that I guess that is one really good benefit from the pandemic is that it is easy to just carry out normal lessons from home. So from an academic perspective, that's really good to hear that his school is taking those measures. And I would really hope that other schools would do the same for students because it's more than possible to do. So they should be able to do it. And I think it would make the academic side of school much better for people, other young people in that situation. But obviously, missing out on alternative learning week is not ideal at all. So hopefully, in the future, things could be put in place to make it more accessible. Because also, if there was a student in the school who used a wheelchair full time, it wouldn't be fair to just say to that student, you're excluded from this week once a year. Hopefully, things could be considered to make it more accessible in the future. Thank you very much for answering our series of questions. It's been really interesting to hear about both your son's experience with having club feet. Are there any sort of last things that you have to say or want to share with us that you think might be useful or interesting to share?
No, I think I've covered everything off, and I just want to say thank you. Really, it's it's nice to be asked. Let's put it that way. It's nice to be asked. And if I know you're speaking to a lot of people, mums and young people about their experiences of accessibility to health and social care, I just think it's nice to be asked and to see if we can learn the good bits and improve the bad bits kind of collectively. So it's just thanks for the opportunity.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for being here to share your experience.
There's more on your web. There will be more on your web, but those are our sort of main sort of learning from what we found out, what we heard. Just want to thank you again for your time today.
Youth Out Loud is a group of young people helping to improve our local health and care services. We work with Healthwatch Kingston and we use our voices to make health and care services better for young people.